Hello everyone! Today I'm going to share a brand new story on my channel, The Twists of Life. Catherine Dawson had learned, over the years, how to become smaller without realizing it. She adjusted her tone before speaking, chose her words carefully, and learned to read the atmosphere of a room the way other people checked the weather. If Eric was quiet, she stayed quiet. If he was irritated, she worked harder to smooth the edges. She told herself this was what marriage required: patience, flexibility, the willingness to bend before something broke. It had not always been like this. There had been a time when Eric laughed easily, when he spoke to her as an equal. But in recent months, something had shifted. The change was not sudden enough to point to a single moment, yet undeniable all the same. His voice had grown sharper. His remarks came laced with contempt rather than frustration. Even ordinary questions were answered with irritation, as if her presence itself had become an inconvenience. Most of it, Catherine knew, circled back to the same subject: children, or rather, the absence of them. Doctors had been clear. Every test Catherine underwent came back normal. There was no medical explanation on her side. Each appointment ended with the same calm reassurance, the same professional suggestion that Eric should also be examined. Every time she relayed this, Eric reacted the same way. He scoffed, dismissed the doctors as incompetent, and refused even the idea of testing. The conclusion, in his mind, was already decided. If there was a problem, it was hers. He began to say it out loud, sometimes as a joke, sometimes as an accusation, sometimes with a sneer that left no room for misunderstanding. Defective, broken. Catherine never argued back. She absorbed the words, folded them inward, and searched herself for faults she could fix. If she tried harder, waited longer, became better, perhaps things would return to how they had been. She avoided confrontation because she had always avoided it. Silence felt safer than resistance. Yet even she could feel that something was nearing a breaking point. That evening, she prepared herself for a conversation she had postponed for months. She rehearsed sentences in her head, practiced steady breathing, and told herself she would finally ask what was happening to her marriage. Not accuse, not demand, just ask. The house stood as a reminder of everything they had invested, and everything now at risk. They had bought it 4 years earlier, stretching their finances thin, taking on a mortgage that consumed nearly all their savings. It was large, beautiful, and carefully maintained. Eric loved it. He spoke of it with pride, as proof of his success, his status, his future. To him, the house was not just a home. It was evidence. As Catherine stood preparing to walk back inside that evening, she felt the weight of unspoken tension pressing down on her. Nothing had happened yet. No words had been exchanged. But the air was already heavy, filled with years of quiet endurance and a growing sense that something essential was slipping out of reach. Catherine stepped inside the house, expecting tension, not silence broken by evidence. 2 large suitcases stood just inside the doorway, neatly packed, handles facing outward as if waiting. For a moment, she assumed they were leftovers from a trip she had forgotten. Then she noticed how carefully they were arranged, how deliberate their placement felt, and her stomach tightened. Eric appeared from the living room, his expression unreadable. Behind him came a young woman Catherine had never seen before. She was slim, confident, and entirely at ease, leaning against a doorframe as though she already belonged there. She looked at Catherine without embarrassment or apology, her gaze curious and appraising. Catherine glanced back at the suitcases. "Eric," she said carefully, "whose bags are those?" He shrugged, irritation flickering across his face. "Yours." For a second, the words failed to register. "Mine." "Yes. I packed everything you need." He gestured toward the hallway. "Those are yours. The others are Madison's. She just hasn't had time to put her things away yet." Catherine looked at the young woman again. "Who is Madison?" she asked, though her voice had already begun to tremble. Eric exhaled sharply, as if tired of explaining something obvious. "Don't be ridiculous," he said. "She's the one who's going to live here now." The sentence landed with blunt finality. Catherine took a step forward. "Eric, what are you talking about?" "I came home to talk." "We need to." "There's nothing to talk about," he interrupted. "You're leaving." "Leaving where?" she asked. He shrugged again, this time with indifference. "That's not my problem." Madison smiled faintly, her expression almost amused, as if observing a scene she already knew the ending to. Eric continued, his voice steady, rehearsed. "You're 37, Catherine. I waited. I gave you time, and you still couldn't give me an heir." He paused, then added the words that seemed to strip the air from the room. "Your expiration date is over." Catherine stared at him. "Expiration date?" she repeated. "Do you hear yourself?" "I hear myself just fine," he said. "I'm done wasting time. Madison will be the woman of this house now. I'll take care of the divorce paperwork. You don't need to worry about that." She opened her mouth to respond, but he was already moving. Eric picked up one of the suitcases, carried it to the door, and set it outside. Then the other. When Catherine tried to step forward, he placed a hand on her shoulder and pushed her back with sudden force. "Don't make a scene," he said coldly. Before she could regain her balance, she was on the porch. The door closed behind her. The lock turned. Catherine stood there, stunned, the night air pressing against her skin. Across the street, a neighbor had paused, pretending to adjust something in her yard while watching the scene unfold. Catherine felt the weight of that silent gaze settle over her like an accusation. She reached for her phone with shaking hands and called a taxi. When it arrived, the driver glanced at the suitcases, then at her. "Where to?" he asked. Catherine looked at him, then past him, unable to form an answer. She had been removed from her life, so completely that she no longer knew where she belonged. Catherine chose movement over collapse. As the taxi pulled away from the house that no longer belonged to her, she stared out the window until the streets blurred together. Her phone buzzed with unanswered thoughts, but she did not call anyone. There was nowhere to explain herself, yet nowhere to land. Then a memory surfaced, quiet, persistent. The small cabin her grandmother had owned near Mount Hood. It had been empty for years, untouched since the last visit to settle paperwork. Forgotten, but still there. At the station, time narrowed into sharp edges. One train stood at the platform, doors open, engine humming. The next departure would not come for 2 days. Catherine checked the board twice, as if hoping it might change. It did not. She bought a ticket with the last clarity she had left and hauled her suitcases toward the car, feeling each step in her shoulders and spine. The journey stretched to 7 hours. Somewhere between stations, exhaustion won. Her head fell against the window, and sleep took her without warning. In her dream, her grandmother's kitchen glowed with warm light. Dough rested beneath a cloth. The smell of baked apples filled the room. Hands moved with practiced calm, and a familiar voice hummed a tune Catherine had not heard in years. It was safe there, predictable. Nothing demanded explanations. "Ma'am." A voice cut through the dream. "This is your stop." Catherine startled awake. A conductor stood over her, expression tight with routine impatience. "You need to gather your things," he said. "We're only here for 2 minutes." She nodded, flustered, fumbling with the straps of her bags. As she stood, the weight of her suitcases reminded her that the warmth had not been real. It never was. The train pulled away just as she stepped onto the platform. Dawn hovered uncertainly behind low clouds. The air was cold, sharp enough to wake her fully. The station was nearly empty. Only a few figures moving with purpose while Catherine stood still, orienting herself. She adjusted the straps. lifted one suitcase, then the other. The road ahead stretched farther than she remembered. The village lay several miles away, beyond trees and quiet bends in the road. No one was waiting for her. There were no directions, no welcome. Catherine took a breath and started walking. Each step felt detached from the one before it, as if she were watching herself from a distance. She was moving, surviving, carrying what remained of her life toward a place that no longer felt like home. Suspended between what she had lost and what she did not yet know how to become, Catherine had barely taken a few steps away from the platform when she noticed the movement near the station steps. At first, she thought it was a bundle of discarded clothing. Then the bundle shifted. A small girl sat curled against the concrete, knees pulled tightly to her chest, her shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear into herself. Catherine stopped. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were too alert for someone so small, watchful in a way that did not belong to childhood. "I'm fine," she said, though her teeth chattered. "I'm just waiting." "Waiting for who?" "For them to leave." The girl hesitated, then added, "When my mom has guests." Something in the careful choice of words made Catherine's chest tighten. "You wait here when that happens." The girl nodded. "It's quieter. I don't like it when they're inside." She rubbed her arms as a cold wind cut across the platform. Sometimes it takes a long time. Before Catherine could respond, an older man approached from the far end of the station, pushing a broom. He paused when he saw them. "She hiding out again?" he asked, not unkindly. The girl lowered her head. "Le Mensite." "Happens all the time," he said to Catherine. "Mother drinks. Brings strangers home. Kid doesn't want to be there." He shook his head. "She sits out here until it's over. Folks from the diner sometimes give her food. Otherwise, she goes hungry." Catherine felt heat rise behind her eyes. Without thinking, she slipped her coat off and draped it around the girl's shoulders. The child stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, gripping the fabric as if afraid it might be taken back. "What's your name?" Catherine asked. "Olivia," the girl said quietly. "Olivia Clark." Catherine looked toward the road that led away from the station, then back at the child. She thought of the long walk ahead, the empty cabin, the silence waiting for her there. The decision came without planning, driven by something older than logic. "Come with me," she said. "Just for now. I have a place nearby. It's warm." Olivia studied her face, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have been enough. She nodded. The groundskeeper cleared his throat. "Hold on," he said, disappearing briefly behind a shed. He returned with a small metal luggage cart, its wheels mismatched but sturdy. "Passengers leave these behind. I fix them up." He handed it to Catherine. "It'll help." Together, they loaded the suitcases. Catherine took the handle, Olivia walking beside her, coat wrapped tight. As they left the station behind, the silence shifted. The road ahead was still long, but it no longer belonged to Catherine alone. Something had changed direction, not away from pain, but toward responsibility she had not been looking for, yet could not ignore. The cabin emerged from the trees like a memory that had learned to wait. Its paint had faded, and the porch sagged slightly at one corner, but the walls stood firm. The roof held. Windows, though dusty, were intact. It was old and neglected, but not abandoned in the way ruins were. It still knew how to shelter someone. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Catherine set the suitcases down and moved on instinct, opening vents, checking the stove, finding kindling where her grandmother had always kept it. When the first flame caught, the sound felt louder than it should have, sharp and reassuring at once. Slowly, warmth returned to the room. The quiet shifted from hollow to calm. As she unpacked, a realization settled in with a dull ache. Madison had not been selective. Everything Catherine owned had been packed: clothes, shoes, work files, old sweaters she wore only at home. There had been no pause, no hesitation, no dignity spared. It was not just removal. It was erasure. Olivia watched from the table, her legs swinging slightly as Catherine laid things out. "You have a lot of nice stuff," she said, wonder creeping into her voice. Catherine smiled faintly. "It's just things." They ate from what Catherine had bought at the station. Simple food, shared quietly. Between bites, Olivia spoke in fragments, the way children do when truth slips out before they realize it has weight. There was no single father, no one who stayed. Her mother told her that any man who came over was her dad, that calling them that made them kinder, more generous. Olivia said it as if repeating a rule, not an accusation. Catherine's hands clenched beneath the table. She said nothing, only reached for more food, placing it carefully in front of the child. As they ate, she noticed something unsettling in its simplicity. Her thoughts were no longer circling Eric. The house, the insult. The door, closing behind her, those images had dulled. Her attention had shifted entirely, pulled toward the girl sitting across from her. That night, as the cabin settled into warmth, Catherine searched through her belongings and found an old sewing kit. She worked quietly, cutting and stitching by lamplight, turning one of her own thick sweatshirts into something smaller, warmer. Her fingers remembered the motions from childhood, from evenings spent beside her grandmother. When Olivia woke and saw the clothes laid out, her eyes widened. She touched the fabric with reverence. "Did a fairy make this?" she asked. Catherine laughed softly, surprised by the sound. "Something like that." Olivia hugged the garment to her chest. "Thank you, fairy." As the child drifted back to sleep, Catherine sat alone in the dim light. A strange warmth spread through her chest, unfamiliar and frightening. It felt like responsibility, sudden and absolute. The thought followed immediately after, that if she failed, there would be no one else. The fear settled deep. But beneath it, something steadier took root. Healing had begun, quietly, and the stakes had risen beyond anything Catherine had ever planned to carry. The realization came without drama, without a single defining moment. Catherine simply knew Olivia could not be returned to that house, to that waiting, to that quiet fear learned far too early. The thought of walking her back to the station, of leaving her there to disappear into the same pattern again, felt unbearable. It was not a decision Catherine debated. It was a boundary that formed fully and refused to move. She made the call the next morning. Jonathan Miller answered on the second ring, surprise evident in his voice. They had known each other for years, once close, before Catherine's marriage slowly narrowed her world. Eric had never forbidden contact outright, but his disapproval had been constant enough that distance formed on its own. Catherine explained everything now, her voice steady in a way that surprised her. Being expelled from her own home, the suitcases, the locked door, and Olivia, her living situation, the neglect, the fear. Jonathan listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was a brief silence on the line. Then he said, clearly and without hesitation, "You did the right thing. It won't be easy, but it can be handled." For the first time since the door had closed behind her, Catherine believed him. 2 months passed. Paperwork moved. Consultations followed. Olivia stayed with Jonathan's mother during the days Catherine traveled back and forth, balancing legal steps with fragile stability. When Catherine finally returned to the house she had been thrown out of, she did not go alone. Eric opened the door and froze. His confusion shifted quickly to anger when he saw Jonathan beside her, another attorney standing just behind. "What is this?" he demanded. "You can't just walk in here." "I can," Catherine said quietly. "This is my home, too." Eric laughed sharply, disbelief flashing across his face. He tried to speak over them, to dominate the space with raised voice and sweeping gestures. When legal terms were mentioned, his composure cracked. He stepped closer to Catherine, fists tightening, his words turning sharp and personal. Jonathan moved between them without hesitation. "That's enough," he said, calm but firm. "This conversation is over." Eric protested, threatened, accused. None of it changed the outcome. Jonathan gathered the documents and stepped back toward the door. "We'll proceed through the court," he said. "From this point on, communication goes through legal counsel." As they left, Catherine did not look back. The shift had already happened. She was no longer pleading to be let in. She was stepping forward, claiming space she had never realized she was allowed to occupy. Night settled gently over Jonathan's mother's house, the kind of quiet that carried every sound. Catherine had risen to get a glass of water when she heard voices drifting from the bedroom down the hall. She paused, recognizing Olivia's soft cadence, hesitant but intent. "Grandma," Olivia whispered, "do you think wishes really come true?" Jonathan's mother answered with warmth. "If you want something badly enough, sometimes they do." There was a brief silence. Then Olivia spoke again, the words rushing out as if she feared they might disappear if she waited too long. "I wish Catherine and Jonathan were my parents. For real. I'd be really good. I'd listen. I'd get good grades. I promise." Her voice faltered. "I don't even miss my mom anymore. I'm scared she'll come back and take me." Catherine stood frozen in the hallway, the glass trembling slightly in her hand. She did not step forward. She did not breathe. Each word landed with quiet force, heavier than anything spoken aloud during the day. Olivia was not asking for comfort. She was asking for permanence. Jonathan's mother soothed the child gently, promising safety, promising that no one would take her away tonight. When the room fell quiet again, Catherine retreated into the shadows, her chest tight, eyes burning. She had expected responsibility. She had not expected to be named as the answer to someone else's fear. Jonathan found her a few minutes later, leaning against the kitchen counter, staring at nothing. He did not ask what she had heard. He only said softly, "You heard her." Catherine nodded. "I was going to wait," he said, "until the divorce was finalized, until everything looked neat on paper." He paused. "But there's never a perfect time for the things that matter most." He did not frame it as salvation. He did not promise ease or certainty. "I want to do this with you," he said, "not to fix anything, not to rescue anyone, just because this is the family I choose." Catherine looked at him, really looked, and felt the weight settle into place. It was not desperation that guided her answer. It was clarity. "Then we do it properly," she said. "Together." The house remained quiet around them. No declarations, no rush, just a decision made in the dark, steady, and irrevocable, changing the shape of what came next. The divorce concluded without spectacle. Papers were signed, assets divided through the court, and the chapter that had once defined Catherine's life closed with a series of formal stamps and quiet acknowledgments. Eric did not apologize. He did not reflect. He simply exited, carrying with him the certainty that he had been right. The legal process concerning Olivia took longer. It required documentation, evaluations, hearings, and patience. Evidence of neglect was reviewed carefully, without haste or drama. Olivia's biological mother lost her parental rights through due process, not punishment. The decision was final, measured, and irrevocable. Catherine and Jonathan married shortly afterward. There was no large ceremony, no audience, just a small gathering, clear vows, and the understanding that what they were building did not need to be proven to anyone else. When Olivia's adoption was finalized, she held Catherine's hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white, as if afraid that even now, something could still be taken away. Catherine squeezed back, anchoring her in place. A year later, another child entered their lives. The house filled with a different kind of noise, Routine, laughter, interrupted sleep. Shared responsibility. Olivia learned how to be a sister. Catherine learned how motherhood unfolded not as instinct alone, but as choice renewed daily, somewhere else. Eric continued his life. The house he once claimed as proof of his worth stood unchanged, but emptier in ways that could not be measured. He had reduced a woman to an expiration date, convinced that value diminished with time and circumstance. Catherine never measured herself that way again. She understood now that family was not something earned by meeting another person's demands. It was chosen, built deliberately, sustained through presence and accountability. Motherhood was not owed to anyone. It was claimed, not through biology alone, but through love that showed up, stayed, and carried weight when it mattered most. There was no victory speech, no reckoning delivered aloud. Justice arrived quietly in warm rooms, in bedtime routines, in the certainty that no door would be closed behind them again.